This plant is called Hoya carnosa, otherwise known as wax plant, and it may look a little unremarkable because it's just these kind of succulent green leaves, but this gets an incredible bloom, which is particularly why people bring Hoya in their house, because they get these really beautiful blooms, and some of them actually smell quite amazing. Now, Hoya carnosa is an easy one to get your hands on as far as Hoyas go, because I think it's the one that's been in the longest for cultivation and is totally common at like plant shops and garden centers. This was actually my first Hoya. So, and I hear that often from people who actually bring Hoya in their homes. Hoya carnosa is usually their first one, or at least one of their first. Now, this is actually native to Japan, China, Taiwan, and it is relatively a prolific grower. As a matter of fact, I should say, because I am in the Northern Hemisphere, most Hoya actually don't like any kind of chill factor. They don't like anything under 50 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 degrees Celsius. However, Hoya carnosa could actually manage being a little bit cold. So if you have a room that has nice, bright, diffuse light, but maybe is not heated, then Hoya carnosa should actually be fine. But like most Hoyas who can't actually stand the chill factor probably wouldn't. So it's part of the reason why I think this actually makes a really good houseplant, because it can actually stand a little bit more chill, it could stand a little bit more neglect. Most Hoya, including Hoya carnosa, actually like to be in a bit more diffuse light. However, I would say that this is kind of on the higher end of lighting needs. So 50 to 70% full sun would actually be perfectly all right with this, although you could actually give it a little bit more partial shade, moderate light as well. It's just a little bit more of a versatile plant than most Hoyas. And again, I think it's part of the reason what makes this a pretty easy houseplant. Now, as far as watering goes, you don't want to overwater your Hoya. They hate having wet roots, and part of it is because this particular plant, as well as like most Hoya, are epiphytic, which means it's growing on something else. So it doesn't have its roots in water so much. One of the things I should caution you is that sometimes houseplant growers will actually grow this in a very peaty mix, and that could be very dense. And if you are watering frequently, it could be pretty much stuck in muck, and that's not a good thing. So if you get a chance, I would actually repot your Hoya with something that is a little bit more well-draining. So maybe increase the perlite, maybe increase with like some fir bark or orchid bark or anything along those lines in with a regular peat mix. I know a number of people in Asia are actually growing these in pure cocoa mix. Just wash out the cocoa mix beforehand, because you don't know if it was like those coconuts are grown near the seashore and if it has a ton of salt in it. So you just want to be able to wash those out in advance. But otherwise, I think that kind of substrate actually works really good for most Hoyas, including Hoya carnosa. Now, fertilizing, as far as fertilizing goes, Hoyas are not big feeders. So if you're doing a synthetic fertilizer, I would say do it on a monthly basis, but cut it in half. So if it's saying that it's a half a teaspoon per gallon, then I would say cut it in half to about a quarter teaspoon. I'm trying to actually fertilize all my Hoyas with organic fertilizer, so that's really gentle fertilizer, and I'm doing it more on a bi-weekly basis, only because that organic fertilizer is a lot less than what a synthetic fertilizer typically is, and I think that they're pretty much, you know, kind of happy campers. Now, Hoya are prolific bloomers. It does take maybe about 3 years for Hoya carnosa to actually bloom. And unfortunately, nothing is in bloom now, so I can't show you. But when it's in bloom, I would say up the phosphorus level of your fertilizer, because the phosphorus allows the plant to bloom in a stronger capacity. And I think that will be perfect for your Hoya. And again, just have to be patient. So if you just got your Hoya and you don't know how old it is, or if you got a cutting, then you might have to wait a little bit for its beautiful white blooms to emerge. As far as propagation goes, you could actually take cuttings. There's like these little adventitious roots that you could see kind of growing on here, and these will actually root up quite easily. You could root them up in water, you could root it up in sphagnum. This is generally one that kind of roots up fairly readily. And if you don't want something that's kind of like growing wildly. This one I would say is not growing wildly, and not, at least in not like my opinion. And this can trellis as well. I would say you could actually grow this on a trellis. This one looks a little bit more like a hanging basket plant. But you can actually cut back or prune back or snip back some of their growing tips, and then you'll have a little bit more of a compact plant, because Hoya, including Hoya carnosa, tends to scramble out all about, and I personally like that, but not every houseplant enthusiast does, and not everybody houseplant enthusiast has like room for it to scramble around. So, so I would say if you want to clip it back and you feel comfortable with that, then you will have a little bit more of a compact plant. As far as pests go, I would say that this has never had any pests, although I have seen mealybugs on some of my Hoya houseplants. And I would say mealybugs is probably kind of the biggest pest that you could get on your Hoya. So there are many different ways to kind of combat mealybugs. Sometimes it's just mechanically through your own hands, but I have YouTube videos more extensively on mealybug, getting rid of mealybugs, and also on Hoya care. So you could check those out online. But otherwise, try to pick up a Hoya because they're really amazing plants. I've been growing Hoya now for around 3 years. I've gotten most of my Hoya over the last 3 years, and I have to say that it is definitely something that I will be growing more of.